After more than 20 years of being in service, the 8th diopter auxiliary lens finally dislodged. Now there's nothing in this space. Now the auxiliary lens wheel has lenses smaller in size. This looks like about 17 millimeters in diameter. The sphere lenses, plus or minus a quarter, plus or minus 3 diopter, and the cylinder lenses are larger in diameter, about 20 millimeters, and if they dislodge, you basically have to take apart the Phoroptor in order to reglue them. The auxiliary lenses, being smaller in size, can actually fit through the Phoroptor opening to extract the lens and then to replace it. So what I do is I reglue this with epoxy glue. Epoxy glue comes in 2 parts. Typically I take a small dab of each type at approximately equal proportions, and then I whip it together with a chopstick, and then using small tip screwdriver I apply it to the edge of the frame of where I'm going to reglue the lens. The lens itself has a very mild asymmetry. There's a sharp edge and another edge that's a little bit cornered or rounded. And typically the one with a filed edge is the one that gets attached where the glue is. Gives it a little more surface area, I guess. Place for the glue to hold. So I've applied a small amount of glue to the inside edge of where the lens has to be re-glued. And then one way to get the lens through the Phoroptor is this is masking tape folded inside out, and then the lens is stuck to it, and I can insert that right through the Phoroptor body to get it in place into where it needs to go, then rotate slightly to help spread around the glue, and then hold in place until it starts to set, which usually is more than 5 minutes. So here I've inserted the lens in place, and I'm holding it with this chopstick until it's had enough time to set. As a backup way of determining when the glue is hardened, I often stick a Q-tip in the used glue, and then once this seems to be solid, I know it's pretty close, but I also usually set a timer. The first 15 minutes is a good time to clean off any excess glue. If you wait a half hour, the epoxy gets so hard you really can't even clean it off with rubbing alcohol. So what I usually do is it takes 5 or more minutes for the glue to harden and hold in place. Then I, in the next 5 minutes, I might leave it sit, and in the next 5 minutes clear off any glue residue from the lens surface, because optically it'll be distorted if you have a big glob of glue hanging around the side, and it's really hard to remove once it's fully hardened. Half hour or more. It's really tough to get any glue residue off from epoxy. The retinoscopy lens is similarly easy to reglue. However, the plus or minus 50 cross cylinder is a lot tougher to reglue because you've got to get the right alignment, as is the Polaroid. Much tougher to reglue the Polaroid lens when it dislodges. Similarly, if a regular cylinder lens dislodges, what I typically do is I send the dislodged lens and the cylinder assembly into Lombard to have them reglue it on axis. Another tough maneuver to get a cylinder lens glued in on axis. For the Polaroid lens to reglue, and I've reglued many Polaroid lenses, what's useful to have is like a a polarized slide, and what I can do is I can actually hold the polarized slide in front of the Phoroptor opening and orient the Polaroid lens until I get proper cancellation. And you can tell by rotating it off axis when it cancels or when it's showing both the right and left images visible, and then I try to get to that midpoint so I'm getting proper cancellation with the Polaroid lens, regluing. So the regluing with 5-minute epoxy is about 5 minutes. It starts to harden. Over the next 10 minutes it solidifies pretty well, and then a half hour it's probably 95% of its final hardness, and you really can't change much after that. But got a good outcome with regluing of this lens. The edge here with this is loss of paint, which happens with some Phoroptors over the years, especially when people don't use face shields on the Phoroptors. Another Polaroid lens which dislodged. To keep the orientation correct, I mark up the lens like this with the little hash marks on the frame, going with those hash marks, these lines going with these grooves. And then the P, because if I get it flipped, then it reverses the orientation, and is able to verify the angle by holding it over a Polaroid slide. You can see if you get it off angle, the other image starts appearing. So I basically held this slide over the Phoroptor opening when I got the lens in position, and I was able to verify I had the proper line up for proper Polaroid cancellation. So this is sort of bizarre, but the Polaroid lens is so flimsy that if I just sort of press it in the center against the frame, what I find is it doesn't hold evenly on the edges. So I have like 6 different Q-tips here to put pressure on different parts of the lens to help ensure that the glue is going to stick all around the edges of the lens more effectively than if I just press with one single Q-tip in the center. And using a Q-tip, of course, keep my fingers out of the glue. Now, one step I didn't mention before doing the gluing process is to clean off any glue residue from the frame where you're gluing the lens, and clean off any glue residue from the lens itself to get better adhesion with the new glue. So this is basically how I mark up the lens once I've got the proper alignment. And then there's little washers that basically hold the frame in place at the top and bottom in the auxiliary wheel. So here's the Polaroid after regluing, and then to confirm the alignment, rotating about 45 degrees, both images start to appear. Maybe a little bit too much light here. And pretty good cancellation in the vertical position.